Well, hello there to anybody who's watching this. Probably not too many of you. I'm going to do some videos of a playthrough of World at War 85 using the solo system. Mainly, my friend Brad is interested in seeing how the solo system works. I have the Storming the Gap that I got on Kickstarter, and Brad is waiting for the next edition. I think it's called Blood and Fury. He kickstarted that, and so he's curious how the solo system works, and so am I. So we're going to give that a go. This is scenario 17, The Deceived, and it's a big scenario because I'm always playing these big scenarios and then often not finishing them. We'll see how this goes. This is a 3-map scenario. The Warsaw Pact enters on either this is the east edge or the south edge of the map down here, and they have to make their way and capture some objectives here, here, and here. We'll zoom in a little bit to see that better. So this is the north map here. The NATO forces, they're all American forces in this, are defending, and so there are 3 objectives. There is objective A over here, Elsenfeld Bridge. The Soviets need to capture the bridge, this hex and this hex, not the entire town. And the second objective is this bridge here, Sulzbach am Main. And you'll notice a lot of these destroyed bridges icons here. So this scenario is positing that the NATO forces have blown a lot of bridges to try to slow the Soviets down. The Soviets are trying to capture what's left. So this objective here. And then down here, the Soviets have some victory conditions for exiting forces. I shouldn't even really say the Soviets. So this scenario is a scenario where the East Germans are trying to make a thrust, but the Russians are so interested in. I'm sorry, it's not an exit. The map scenario. The Warsaw Pact needs to capture these 2 hexes entirely. So this is a push by the East German forces that the Soviets are so invested in succeeding that they have allocated some substantial resources to help the East Germans. So the East Germans come in up here, and they have to take not only this bridge and town in the north, but they also have to take these 2 in the south. And NATO has a relatively thin force defending initially, and they will get some reinforcements. So let's look at the forces now. The East Germans have a motorized infantry outfit here that is going to be coming down with, they got some pretty good armored personnel carriers, the BMPs, and infantry, and supported by some older tanks and some anti-aircraft arsenal, a couple recon vehicles, and some self-propelled artillery right here, along with a mortar unit. They also have a tank company, I think. So with 10 T-72s, so better tanks for this unit, and an anti-air element. And then they also have close air support. They've got the Su-22 card, and they've got a couple of high explosive artillery strikes and a couple of smoke missions, and the designated formation card, which could allow one of their formations to activate more than once in a turn. The Soviets, as I said, are very invested in this succeeding, and so they have sent a element of the Guards Tank Regiment with 10 T-80 tanks. They are not here yet, though. They're going to be getting into the battle on turn 4. And they're also sending a couple of Hind helicopters and a designated formation. So when the Soviets arrive, they're going to have a designated formation card, 2 formation cards for their helicopters, and 1 formation card for their tanks. So when the Soviets get there, they'll be able to activate a lot. And the Americans are initially defending with a tank company here, 3 M1 Abrams, and another tank company with 3 tanks. But these are M60 Pattons, so not nearly as good as the Abrams, but they're still tanks. And they also have an infantry division, elements of an infantry division here, where they've got 2 infantry platoons, and then an Abrams platoon, self-propelled mortar, anti-air, and some support weapons for the infantry. Those are all deployed at the beginning of the game, and they also have 3 high explosive mission, 1 smoke mission, and 3 air delivered mines missions. So they've got quite a bit of off-board support. And arriving turn 3 or later is going to be another part of an infantry division with Bradleys and some infantry units and more anti-air, mortars, and support weapons. And although actually there's an errata, this support weapon here, this anti-air shoulder-fired missile, is not part of the scenario. And they're sending in 2 Cobras, but because of fatigue, the Cobras only have 1 formation card instead of 2. And the U.S. also has the A-10 Warthog available for support, and that is available from the beginning of the game. The first 3 turns of this are night turns, and so the Warsaw Pact has to figure out how to send their East German forces down the map to capture both this northern thing and also fight their way through down here. So I'll show you how I've deployed the forces for NATO. The NATO forces are, this is the infantry division. They have free setup. They could set up pretty much anywhere here on the second map. And this is the Abrams Tank Company here defending Objective C, which is the first one that the East Germans will hit. And then this is the company of Patton tanks down here, the final objective. In order to win a major victory, Warsaw Pact has to capture all 3 objectives. They can get a partial victory by capturing 2. So my thinking was I could have had the infantry division specifically try to defend this bridge here, but I think that it's more than likely that the Warsaw Pact will be able to overwhelm any forces up here and then make a sort of pincher move coming this way. So I thought it made more sense to basically give this up, see how many forces the East Germans want to dedicate to headed this way, and have some flexibility with being set up on this high ground here in cover to try to thwart any forces that might take this and come this way, or be able to reposition fairly quickly to come down here to support the defense of this town here. You'd think, well, so the East Germans could just send individual units up here to capture this town by themselves. And they do have some recon units, so they could do that. They could send an individual recon unit up here to take this objective and not have to worry about that unit being out of command. I'll see if we decide to do that or not. And that might just expose a flaw in my tactical thinking. I think we'll see many exposed flaws in my tactical thinking as this game goes on. But this is what I'm going to try to do with the NATO forces, try to hold them off long enough for the relatively substantial NATO reinforcements to arrive and maybe make a counterattack. Remember, NATO reinforcements show up possibly at least before the Russians arrive, although with the card pull, chip pull way that this game works, you can never be sure that your forces will arrive on the turn that they are first available. So so I think that for the East Germans, I have to think, well, do I want to try to send my more powerful force here, my larger force anyway, the infantry, straight south and try to run this over, and maybe send the more mobile units, the tank units, this way to capture here and try to come around this way and force the NATO troops to decide what they're going to do with this infantry division here? Or do I want to, just pair off a little bit of force to capture this and then send the main body of the East German forces straight at the heart of the NATO defenses? I'm still not sure which one of those options I think is best. While I'm thinking about that, we'll talk about a couple of optional rules. The thermal image optional rule to me seems like something that could well be just a general rule. And so we're going to be using the thermal imaging, which will help NATO out when they're dealing with defending on the night turns. And that's about the only optional rule that I'll be using. I've got a couple different player aids that I find helpful up here. And since I'm playing this solo and I'm using the Vassal module, Tabletop Simulator does have the solo setup, but I find using the Tabletop Simulator to be visually pleasing but fiddly and hard to manage. And I like the functionality of Vassal with the right-click menus, and this is a pretty good module for all those things, so I'm going to use Vassal. But to display the solo cards, I'm going to use the Tabletop Simulator. For the solo cards here, I have the actual solo cards in front of me, which I'll use to do my own reading, but you'll be able to see what cards I pull and how I'm doing the solo assistance. So I'm going to play the attacking force, the Warsaw Pact force here, and I'm going to have the solo assistant take the NATO force. I just generally assume that solitaire systems are better suited to defense than they are attack, although I don't know that for sure. So there are two ways to use the solo system. The solo system utilizes orders cards. So this is one, and so I'll flip this so you can see what it means. And there are ways to determine which of these orders you use based on how close an enemy unit is to the unit or formation that is activating. And so the closer the units, the closer the enemy is, the more you're going to use this priority section here. This is second tier orders, and these are third tier orders. Priority red, yellow, blue, and then these are secondary orders. If none of the priority conditions are met, you use these. There are occasional situations where you're told to execute counteractions or execute victory conditions, and those are outlined here. And there are two ways to do this. You can pull an individual card for each unit that activates, or for each NATO formation that activates, you can pull a card and apply that card to all the units in that formation. The designers of the game recommend using that option. Let me get this back in there. They recommend using the option where you use a card per formation. They think that makes more sense because it indicates the whole formation working towards a common goal, and I agree with that. I think that makes sense. Never having played the solo system in this before, I will use the system the way the designers suggest is best. I think that makes sense to go with their instinct there. They certainly know more about this excellent game than I do. And the last thing I'll say before this begins is, so a couple things. So the scenario is 12 turns, and there are 2 end operations cards in the deck. You see the formations come in here, got the weather and all that. You know how that works if you've played this game. I'll explain it as we go if not. As the scenario goes on, if the game gets to a situation where it seems to be a foregone conclusion, one side or the other has an obvious advantage, and it seems like it's clear what's going to happen, I reserve the right to add additional advantages to the losing force to continue the game. I might have the winning side all of a sudden discover that the losing side has snuck some commandos in to the battle in an unexpected position. So either the Spetsnaz or the West German commandos might show up unannounced. I could add some additional off-board artillery assets to try to help a unit out. if I do that, obviously I'll say so that I'm doing it as I do it. My reason for doing that is I just like using all the different chrome and toys that they have in this game. And so the other thing is, I always think that on turn one, it is possible that you could end up with turn one ending right away. I think that there should be at least some activations for both sides happening on turn one. And I also think that in this particular situation, the initiative is not specified by the scenario. At least I don't believe it is. And so it is certainly possible that the NATO formations could get drawn out of the deck first and on the first turn, and then have no activations left, and the Warsaw Pact then gets their activations. So I reserve the right to, if the early card pulls are all NATO formations and the Warsaw Pact isn't even on the map yet, I reserve the right to reseed them into the deck if I think that that is fair. I like to have the first turn have some action so that the game has a chance of progressing through the thing, if that makes sense. So that's how I play this game when I'm playing solo. Obviously, when I'm playing individually, I don't, and I often lose. So that's the setup for this. I'm going to pause the video here while I sort of think through what I want to do about the Warsaw Pact attack, and I'll be back when I'm done with that. All right, so I've decided that it would be a little more fun and interesting to have the East German tanks start out coming this way down this valley, taking this town and rolling this way, and then to have the fairly sizable force of infantry come down this way. In general practice, I think they say it's bad to have tanks operating without infantry, so we'll see how that goes. I also would like to have a recon unit for these tanks, and the infantry does have tanks, although they're older. If there were hidden units in this game, those recon units would be a lot cooler. And I wonder if they, lock and load, they have the digital implementation of their lock and load tactical game. I wonder if there's any consideration of making this a computer game. That would be fantastic. So let's get rolling. The headquarters, I have them out here with the units because they don't need to be on the holding mat now, but normally they are. So let's see, the first formation to activate is a formation that's not supposed to be in the deck. So I'll deal with that when the video is paused. Well, no, here we go. I've got the other formations that are not in the game yet over there. Yeah, let's see. Do I have... Looks like everything else here is supposed to be here. All right, great start. And now here's the first formation. Battlefield event. Well, so the battlefield event card is a table. One side of it has the events and the other side has friction. So you roll dice, and sometimes you are then selected to go to the friction table. So I'm going to roll 2 dice here. We'll see the results right up here. Or we won't see the results. Why do we not see the results? Well, that is disappointing. I've never seen that happen before. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to pause the video and sort that out. Okay, we got that sorted out. Up here, there's all the previous rolls that I messed around with in the last file, but I think it makes sense to just roll again here. We are rolling on the battlefield events table. Let's see what event we get. We get a 6. Overwatch set. Your troops have time to re-ammo and reposition themselves. Remove all ops complete markers from one friendly formation. It's not a formation impulse. So that is irrelevant to us at this point, but that is an event that can be very helpful depending on when it comes up. and whose side it goes to. You have to, once you draw those events, if they could affect one side or the other, the NATO and Warsaw Pact forces have a roll-off to see who gets the event, and that's always a fun moment in the game. So let's get our next card going here, and we have the 8th Infantry Division. I think it's B Company of 69th Regiment, I think. As I'm saying, that what I think there, if you happen to be watching this video, if you see any errors I make in gameplay, I'd love to hear about that. And if you have any thoughts about my tactics or any other comments I make, corrections, I don't take that personally at all. I appreciate it, actually. And so here we have, this is the light blue striped outfit. So that's this outfit all the way back here. They obviously have nothing to do, and so I like their positioning at this point, so I'm not going to activate them and make them ops complete. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass, and we'll draw another card. And so it is it's the Warsaw Pact's turn. It's the East Germans, and that's going to be their tank formation. So I'm just going to randomly stack the headquarters on any stack of 2 tanks. The Warsaw Pact units, their tanks, their heavy armor, are allowed to do volley fire, which is an interesting thing. Getting hits to stick on the Abrams tanks is difficult, and volley fire can help that at the expense of fewer dice that you roll in an attack. I'll explain that if it comes up, but for that reason I tend to bring Warsaw Pact tanks in stacked up. So I'm just going to do this pretty quickly. This is 1 movement point, and you can see the tanks. These T-72s have 6. 1 movement point, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's pretty evident here that there's no line of sight from any NATO forces. They're all the way back here, so we don't have to worry about line of sight at this point. We're just moving the East German tanks onto the map. So this one will come on here for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do I want to go up on that hill to get a view of things? No, I don't think I need to go up on that hill. I think if I'm going to go up on a hill to see things, it'll be this hill down here. So they will just make one more move here, trying to get into this valley as quickly as possible. We can go here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This unit I moved too far. It needs to stop there. You'll see a lot of that from me. Ask anybody that plays me in play-by-email games. So here we go. We'll do the same sort of thing, basically. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'll go up here on the hill 5, 6, just because they can, I guess. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then finally the anti-aircraft unit. I keep them in the back. I don't know if that's good or bad. 1, 2. They're going to go up here 3, 4, and 5, 6, because being elevated might give them a little better shot if American air starts showing up. So one thing that is important is you have to always make sure, I try to always make sure that I end my formation impulses with all of my units in command of the headquarter. So that has been done. Now let's see if I can multi-select ops complete here for all of these units. Yes, I can. Very good. So those units are ops complete. We remove the movement trail. Next formation to activate is the Soviet designated formation, another card that is not in the game quite yet. And then it's the NATO, the U.S. 8th Infantry Division. So the 8th Infantry Division, as I said, they are set up on this hill here defending. And now that we know that the East Germans are sending tanks down here, it might make sense for the Americans to come up here. They'll have two activations. They might be able to get into position to better defend this town. Maybe if they got up onto this hill in the woods, that would make sense. The problem is, where I have them positioned here, if the infantry gets all mounted up, and that'll take a turn, and it'll take probably 2 more formation activations to even get here. So I think I'm going to stick with this and wish that I had deployed here initially. That's how I'm going to do this. And that's the other 8th Infantry Division formation. If anything happens that they might have action, we might seed them back in. So the air support, the Soviet air support is available, and I have to check some things out to see if it's worth bringing that in right now, because it could be shot down, it could end up off the map. So I'm going to pause the recording and think a little more on whether I want to send an air support mission in or not.